Hello and welcome to the Truth About Real Estate Investing show. My name is Erwin Cito, and the interesting thing about this show is I never have any idea what episodes will perform well. And last week's episode with Ben Bergen did indeed surprise. Who knew that you, our 17 listeners, would be interested in a newer investor who almost lost it all, even though they spent around $50,000 in real estate investor education. Please allow me to reiterate, based on my inner observation, what allowed Ben to survive was A, he was local to his investments. So he had a local team and he can be hands-on, be on site, be hands-on. Ben has a construction background, and because he's full-time in real estate, it allowed him to have more control in his project and control his renovation costs. For an out-of-town investor who doesn't understand renovations or how to work with contractors and has no income coming in, because they already quit their jobs on some sort of promise to retire on real estate investing, that investor will be flirting with disaster. I'm not saying don't go big. I would just say go about it slowly. Ideally, have deep pockets from a quality portfolio of properties for security, and to have high quality mentorship and coaching than those who went bankrupt recently. I've had several guests on this show who followed that exact path. Charles Wass, Steve Kulikowski, Ken Beekendam, Victor Minash, Ryan Carr, Sarah Copeland, Quentin D'Souza, Hussein Kudrati, Denise and Stewart McPherson from Ottawa, my wife Cherry. All of the above investors benefit from the market, a lot of time in the market. They're skilled investors, strong analyzers. They'd already made very good incomes before investing. Some have extensive renovation experience and construction experience. Some benefited from intergenerational wealth. The whole point of this show is to share with you, my 17 listeners, what has worked and what does not work. None of the above investors went as highly leveraged with expensive debt as the folks who are losing their shirts right now. I think that's pretty obvious. None of them were trying to be nearly as aggressive and grow this fast early on. Back to our last guest in Ben Bergen. What surprised me was how many folks DM'd Ben and I their approval in sharing the truth about real estate investing, which includes a near bankruptcy. One said it was refreshing to hear an episode that was not all about cheerleading rah-rah, getting rich quick, let alone with high leverage in real estate. Ben's hearing the same. He even had some big names in the industry sending along positive messages, folks who did not know Ben previously. It's as if investors derive value from learning from loss, so they may avoid the same, which is why I don't understand why some of these networking coaching groups are not open about sharing about the losses that are going on, even within their own four walls. Even Warren Buffett, the greatest investor in the world, maybe because he is the greatest investor in the world, he's willing to suck up his ego and share lessons from, for example, the Kraft-Heinz merger that didn't go perfectly well. Actually, the company dipped quite badly, or why his airline investments were losers. I do believe all educational groups mean well, but teaching excessive risk, not sharing about losses, in my experience, note that I've seen this all before. I've seen people go belly up back in 2008 from excessive greed, ego investing, back in 2008 during the credit crisis, during the correction, during the recession. Those who fail to teach history fail to prevent their clients from repeating history. Shout out to professional real estate coach Elizabeth Kelly for referring Ben Bergen to me as a guest of this show. On a personal front, Cherry and I had a wonderful March break. It wasn't without bumps. We found out last minute that the short-term rental we were sharing with our friends, short-term rental STR for short, had a max limit of occupants. So when we were over it, so we had to borrow our friend's cottage, thankfully, because she didn't need it at the time. She wasn't using it at the time, while our friend stayed in an STR. We skied for 5 days. Well, at least the kids and I did. We skied for 5 days as they were in March break camp. The other parents that we were with are mostly accountants, so they couldn't ski nearly as much as I did. Some didn't ski at all, as it is tax season, including Cherry. So I booted around the hills, checking in on everyone's kids. I hung around my kids' camp for quite a bit as well. As 80% of the time I had no one else to ski with. I was welcome as I stayed out of the way I stayed out of the instructor's way. And I had some use to the kids because I happened to have a highly valued skill. I was able to raise and lower the chairlift restraint bar. For those who don't know, that's like a seatbelt when riding a chairlift at a ski resort. By midweek, the kids had learned how to lift and raise their own restraint bar, so I started getting ditched, which makes me emotional. Uh, this small moment is a reminder how my kids are growing up and need me less and less. I know they won't want me around next season, as my dad jokes are pretty horrible. Uh, I tell them to their friend. I say them to their friends anyways. They're kind enough to laugh, but they are terrible. And soon enough, this old man won't be able to keep up with all these young kids. I'm grateful to provide and enjoy these experiences with my kids, as my parents they immigrated here to Canada when they were only 17 from a tropical climate of Hong Kong, with no money and no one to teach them the basics. They never skied before, so I only ever skied during school trips growing up, which is already I'm grateful for and not an opportunity many have. To this day, I remember seeing my friends at school in their nice ski jackets. They would collect ski passes, so they'd leave like the ski pass attached to their jacket, and that was never me. So to this now, to fast forward to today, I do the same. I've had friends comment, "Hey, you left your ski tag on." And I'm like, "Yes," and I'm keeping it there. It's silly. I know it's silly. Maybe I'm just making up for lost experiences. On to this week's show. We have founder of property technology company Viler Lika on the show. He is the founder and CEO of SingleKey. And if you haven't heard of them yet, you're going to want to pay attention to the show because in my experience, they are providing us investors a ton of value at affordable prices. SingleKey is now the largest tenant screening service out there, especially with their last fall, they acquired a company called Neighborly. So if you've been an investor for any amount of time, you likely know who Neighborly is. SingleKey has consumed them. So now their tenant screening services have scaled up and include best practices from both companies. The majority of professional investors I know were already using SingleKey before I ever met Viler, and even so, because it's cheap. It's cheaper than it. This is one of the great things about technology is it's brought down the price of credit checking tenants. It's done online using their fast, cheap encrypted software, and the reports are written in plain. The report results are written in plain English. Even our local big REIT uses SingleKey, and they have I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of tenants. Anyways, Viler is he's super smart, as you can tell. He has both degrees in engineering and an MBA from the same business school that I graduated from at Western University in London. On today's show, Viler shares his journey of graduating from school and starting up a real estate technology business. He was previously in financial services, and he's brought to us this company that us small investors get to use, the same tools that big corporate REITs use. SingleKey will even underwrite insurance on tenants, which can be purchased by the landlord, us, or the tenant. The tenant can insure themselves. How amazing is that? For anyone who follows the news or who's been around or have friends or family looking to rent places, then the rental market is highly competitive in most major-sized cities. If I had to enter a bidding competition to rent a place, I personally would insure myself. I would buy insurance on myself to be able to pay rent in order to set myself apart. Hopefully no one thinks that's a red flag that I have to buy insurance. I would do everything. I'm big on winning. I enjoy winning. I would do everything in my power to be able to win in a multiple offer situation. Viler is also kind enough to share what features are coming up in the next few months that will forever change how we screen non-Canadians and also report tenant rents on their credit, aka Equifax. This is not an episode to be missed, so please enjoy the show. You really need to know what's on the horizon for best practices in technology for tenant screening, so you do not want to miss this. As a bonus, Viler was kind enough to provide us a discount code. It's Irwin, 5-letter word, starts with an E, my name, and that'll get you 20% off of your tenant screening report, your tenant screening background report, and it also works on Americans. I've included a link in the show notes. Please enjoy the show. Hi, Viler. What's keeping you busy these days?
Hey, Aaron, how are you? Thanks for having us here. Thanks for having me on this podcast. What's keeping me busy? Well, running SingleKey is kind of like my day job, so that's always a nonstop, project. Some of the big things that we're actually working now in Q1 of 2023, we've got a brand new website coming out, so keep an eye out for it. 2 weeks from now, it'll be online, and we're working on completely refactoring our application. So all of the products that you know and love with SingleKey are going to have a brand new look, brand new features. All that stuff is coming up at the end of March. So as you can imagine, there's a bit of a sprint now to the finish line to get a lot of these big initiatives out, and excited to see kind of the results from that.
So this is pretty exciting stuff, and like we were chatting before we were recording, like tenant reporting's come a long way. All right. I've been a landlord since 2005, so I was doing the old school, and we didn't even always get it correct. Was handing folks papers to fill
Yeah.
out, paper forms to fill out for tenant applications, and then like the process kept changing, like the regulations around privacy and whatnot, and like we I remember literally having a tenant fill out a form, and then the company that was going to actually run the check said this one's no good, it's outdated, the privacy language has been updated, go do
Yeah.
it again. Like, oh.
Wow.
Yeah, I choice language for that. You know what I mean? It's so much easier now in terms of being a landlord,
It's
to and for tenants to submit, especially great tenants to deal to apply for rental property.
No, absolutely. And I think there's been a lot of changes kind of in the macro environment as well, Aaron, because 2005 was a very different real estate market than
Oh,
now,
yeah.
right? So I think the stakes have increased significantly where, rents are higher, property values are higher, also it's just a much more competitive rental market. There's less stock available, there's less vacancy than there was, or historically low vacancy. So, now we're seeing kind of like, and not only that, but also the risks are higher too, right?
Hmm.
Right now we're at an 8 month backlog at the LTV. So if a tenant stops
Hmm.
paying your rent, you're going to lose a whole year's worth of rental income. So 20, $30,000 is at stake. I tell people it's going to cost you more to total your car in an accident. Sorry, it's going to cost you more to have a bad tenant in your property than if you total your car in an accident, because of the losses.
Hmm.
So what's happening now is that you'd have to be crazy not to actually do due diligence on a tenant before you put them on the lease, given how severe the losses could be. So where 10 or 15 years ago, like doing a credit check was not really kind of the mainstream thing to do. People would just kind of like meet tenants, you kind of suss them out and get a gut feel for them and make a decision based on their income or whatever. Whereas now people are going a lot deeper, and rightfully so, because they have a lot more to lose if they don't get it right. Um, so for that reason, because it is much more of a need now, you're seeing a lot more kind of products in the market, like SingleKey, like Neighborly, and some of the other tools out there to help landlords kind of facilitate that process of tenant screening. Because, and we were talking about this before, as you mentioned, before you'd have to ask the tenant to go to Equifax or TransUnion and
I
actually
did. Yep, I did that. Yeah,
write and just kind of buy the report, print it out, and hand it over. And
which takes a lot of time.
and I'll tell you why, because these are not consumer companies. They sell to banks and insurance companies in the volume of millions.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
selling reports to tenants isn't really their priority.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they don't have a great experience for that reason. So I think that's where we kind of come in, is that, hey, we looked at the rental application process and we said, okay, well, how do we make this super easy? 3 clicks to order, like, less than 5 minutes to get your report, as either for both landlord and the tenants, make it a very simple, easy online mobile experience for both sides. And then not don't just stop at the credit report, but let's ask for more questions. Let's have a full-on online rental application. Let's allow them to upload, proof of income and pay stubs and employment letters and IDs and pet photos and everything they need to basically build that online kind of like tenant resume and put together a nice package they can hand over to the landlord. And then, let's do that in a compliant way where landlords can get like a link directly from SingleKey and not just like a PDF that can be modified, etc. So the next frontier that we're kind of working on this year now is how do we build trust on that application? And how do we deal with some of the fraud that we're seeing in the market now, especially given how competitive the market is right now? I don't know if you've experienced any of that yourself or in.
I see some crazy stuff in terms of fraud.
Oh,
uh, and like we were saying, like I was saying before we're recording, like you mentioned a lot of risks to the
yeah.
landlord. Because properties are more expensive, our mortgages are bigger, right?
Yeah.
So to be vacant, or sorry, not to be having non-payment or rent, is the risk is higher than ever. But like for the listener, like, don't be scared. Like, I've been at this for a long time. I think I've only had really one significant non-payment of rent tenant, but it wasn't a huge amount either. But my point is that the tools and technology are better than ever. Uh, and where I was going with that is, oh,
If
sorry, what I've been
you're
saying
proper
this.
diligence, then I think you're safe. But it kind of like you owe it to yourself to kind of go through that process and do that homework up front because
I'll go a step further. What I've been telling, especially my clients, I've been telling is you're negligent to not do a proper tenant check.
absolutely,
Right?
yeah,
It's no different if you're going to loan someone $100,000. Here I am loaning someone an asset worth $500 million, or
right,
half of that because they're in a duplex of mine.
yeah,
That's an asset worth 400,000, 500,000. So a significant amount of due diligence is required, and it's
absolutely.
easier than ever. Right,
No,
and also just to take that other step, like I was telling you before, whenever you read about professional tenant stories in the media, I always
mhm.
tell people, like, people always send it to me, or people say, "Oh, what this happened." Like, yeah, okay, read the whole thing. So that's the first thing: is read the whole article, get the entire story, and usually near the bottom, you find out that the landlord did not do a tenant check, right? Or that the landlord did not Google the phone number that was given to them, because literally in one example, the phone number led to a escort company. So if they just Googled the phone number, they would have found out that belonged to an escort company, right?
Yeah, fair enough. No, well, you're right. It's easier to kind of like check those things after the fact, and you're like, oh wow, had I paid closer attention, I could spot some red flags. But
Yeah,
you want
yeah,
to work, up front as opposed to at the end, for sure.
right. So
Uh,
so actually, I already recorded with
oh,
10 minute segment just with Mackenzie on how to read a credit report. But sorry, let's actually go back. For anyone who doesn't know Single Key Neighborly, what is it?
yeah. So at a high level, our mission as a company is let's take the risk out of renting for small landlords, independent landlords that are out there, kind of building their real estate portfolio. And as you know very well, Erwin, real estate investment has become a very common practice now for most Canadians to build wealth, plan for retirement, and kind of create some a bit of a nest egg, right? So what we want to do is make sure that they protect it. And what we found is where a lot of the landlords that are doing this out of their desk get in trouble is when it comes to these tenant issues, because they're not like a big property management company. They're not professionals. They don't have the team of paralegals and superintendents and what have you to really support you if anything goes wrong. So we decided, hey, why don't we bring the tools and the scale and the risk management tools that the big multifamily guys have in the hands of the small mom and pop landlord to protect their basically their investment. And the way we do that is in 3 easy steps. So first, we will help you screen your tenant, do that property due diligence that we just talked about upfront to make sure that you can reduce the risk as much as you can and spot any issues or red flags before you lease out to the tenant. Once you lease out to them, second step is we offer a kind of almost free rent collection tool that not only automates rent collecting for you and basically through a pre-authorized debit solution, but it also takes those payments and reports them to the bureau, which is great for two reasons. First, it helps tenants build credit through their rent payment, which is very important. But secondly, it also incentivizes them to pay their rent on time so that they don't constantly miss it or are late, which could affect their credit. And then thirdly, after we collect the rent, we then guarantee it even if tenants don't pay. So that's our rent guarantee program, which is more of an insurance type of product that basically the landlord pays us about 5% of their monthly rent. And in exchange, what we do is we guarantee up to 12 months of lost rental income in case the tenants stop paying. As part of that package, we also cover any property damage for up to $10,000, and we even support with the legal process of eviction if required by hiring a local paralegal, having them assist you and covering their fees as part of that package. So the idea here is that, hey, let's make sure you get your rent check no matter what, even if the tenant stops paying. And then, if you do get in trouble with a tenant, we can step in to basically support you on the legal side so you're not stressed and worried about that process. And, one of the key principles around this is the fact that as a mom and pop, I've got maybe 2, 3 properties max, or on average that I'm managing. If one or two of those tenants stop paying the rent, who's going to cover the mortgage, right? I don't have the scale of 1,000 units like the big guys do, where bad rent is just part of my P&L, and 2, 3%, I don't really care about it. For me as a small homeowner, if I lose that rental income, I'm in a very difficult cash flow position now because I can't make the mortgage. I'm at risk of losing my property. And we saw this happen during COVID, when we had those eviction bans in every province where, some landlords went over a year without getting a rent check. And some of them were in a very difficult situation. Some of them had to sell their properties oftentimes at a loss because there was a delinquent tenant in there because they couldn't afford to stay liquid. So the point with the rent guarantee program is, hey, you can make use of our scale and our large portfolio to basically spread your risk over the thousands of guarantees that we have by just chipping in a little bit. But then, hey, if you're the unlucky landlord that month that got that bad tenant, well, now we can actually dedicate resources towards covering your lost rental income, and then also providing kind of like the risk management solution, the legal support that you need to kind of get the tenants out and go back to being liquid again. So that's the whole concept behind the business.
What I think is fascinating about your rental guarantee insurance business is that uh, tenants have to go through your application process.
Yeah.
And then, actually, quick question: if someone, how so if how do you screen for a tenant? So, say a tenant fills an application. I imagine you're not going to insure all of them.
Yeah, no. And I'll get into that in a second. But I love what we talked about before when we said, hey, you'd have to be negligent not to actually screen a tenant before.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, put yourself in our shoes, right? We're guaranteeing up to $60,000 of lost rental income for this tenant. That would be the same as us pretty much issuing this tenant a $60,000 line of credit. Now, what bank can you go to and get a $60,000 line of credit without running a credit check?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
You're willing to put your money where your mouth is.
Well, exactly, and it's the same thing for the average landlord. Even if you're not on the rent guarantee, this tenant now, if they stop paying the rent, you're going to lose 10. It's going to cost you 10 or 12 months of lost rental income. That's a lot of money that you're pretty much putting at stake. It's the same as basically underwriting a loan for this tenant for that amount. And if they don't pay, you're in trouble, right? So that's why it's so important and critical for you to take the proper steps and go through that due diligence process.
Mhm.
And that's the mindset you have to think through. That, hey, I'm giving this property to this applicant that's worth $2,000, $3,000 a month for 12 months. It's the same as me basically giving them a $20,000, $30,000 line of credit.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And this is I think it's brilliant that you make this offering because that's usually the number one concern that investors have before becoming investors is what if the tenant doesn't pay, what the trash property, all those sorts of things. So you have provided the solution for said problem.
And that's how we came around to this. We were talking about earlier, hey, how did you kind of guys think about, how did you start SingleKey? What was the original story? This was the concept that really kind of anchored, with me. I'll tell you kind of how we started. So basically, my background is I was an engineer, did an MBA, same school that you went to, but in
Mm-hmm.
2015. And then coming out
Best
of that,
business school in the world. We all know that.
Uh, and then I spent about 5 years in kind of consumer risk and finance. I working at the banks, TD Bank and Capital One. And then we were looking at, like, I was working at credit cards at the time. We're looking at like the spend that the most people are spending. They're spending 30%, 40% of their monthly income on just rent. And there wasn't much that the bank was doing for them, right? That there was no financing behind it. There was no insurance. There's no lending. There's no, the risk management. And we're like, okay, well, that's a huge share of wallet. And nowadays you can go to Canadian Tire and buy a fridge and put it on a credit card and get some lending behind it. How come there's no financial instruments to help support rent payments or secure rent payments? So, we started digging in, started talking to homeowners, started talking to tenants, trying to get a sense of kind of what's a problem that we can solve. Where can we add value here as a financial institution? And that's what we zeroed in on, is that, hey, there's a lot of challenges. I need some help listing the property, I need some help finding good tenants, I need some help collecting rent, blah, blah, blah. But the one thing that was a need, like a must-have, was I need to get that rent check at the end of the month because I need that to be in a mortgage, right? So that was kind of the kind of that was a real pain point that needed a solution. And once we looked into it and looked at the numbers, we were like, okay, well, this is a perfect use case for applying an insurance product to something that doesn't happen very often because, as you know, most tenants are great tenants, but you have a few bad apples there, but that when they do go bad, it costs a lot of money. So it's the same as car insurance, right? Hey, you're protecting yourself in case of a delinquent tenant or tenant default that could be very expensive. And we can put some sort of small premium against that to offset that risk and spread that over a large portfolio. And that's how SingleKey was born.
That's a mouthful.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, what year was that? What year did you start SingleKey?
Well, it's 2017 was the initial kind of incorporation, so about 5 years ago, and then 2019 is when we brought or 2019, early 2020, right before COVID, is when we brought the rent guarantee to market.
Oh, nice timing.
Yeah, and that was a bit of a scary moment too, right? Because the world pretty much kind of just completely flipped upside down during that period, and We thought as a risk management company, we're like, okay, well, it doesn't get riskier than this. You've
Yeah,
got
you have a global pandemic event. Like,
pandemic, like job loss. You have eviction bans. So we had Doug Ford go on TV and say, hey, don't worry about paying rent. Focus on paying your groceries, right?
what a nice guy.
Not a great message for a lot of landlords out there. But regardless, I think, it was a good kind of stress test, I think, for us because we were one of the few companies that was able to make it through that high risk period and come out the other side and still be successful and profitable. And that's a large part of that is due to the fact that we always kind of like focus on the underwriting first. So like you mentioned first, we don't allow anybody to get on the rent guarantee without going through proper screening, right? Getting a credit report, proof of income, all that stuff is part of the actual underwriting process. And while we actually have a very kind of a low hurdle for guaranteeing tenants, I would say 80% of the applicants that come our way get approved. We don't even look at credit scores. We're primarily focused on spotting any red flags, any recent bankruptcies, judgments, and then we're looking at income. Hey, do they have enough income or stable income to cover the rent payments? We're looking for a 45% rent to income ratio or below, which, as you know, that's actually a pretty low hurdle because most lenders will look at target more of a 30% rent to income ratio. So we're able to go over 45, and that's based on gross income, before tax or anything else altogether, including any assistance that you're getting. So, as long as at least you do the primary checks and make sure that, hey, because, everything in life follows that 80-20 rule or 90-10 rule where, that 10% of difficult tenants are causing 90% of the headaches. So if you can figure out a way to kind of really identify those folks during the application process, you can really manage risk very effectively for your portfolio.
Viler, the 80% of tenants getting approved, that's actually surprising to me. I didn't think it'd be so high.
No, we wanted to make sure that, the point here is not to kind of basically put forth a barrier where we're excluding people from this program. And in the future, we're looking to make it even more inclusive. And we're working for ways for now to actually also add in students or new to Canada, folks that have no credit, no income. How do we kind of bring them in as well and price
Right.
that? The program is constantly evolving and adding in more kind of segments. But the idea here is that, hey, again, like the vast majority of tenants are good tenants, and bad credit score doesn't necessarily mean a bad tenant. And I say that while we offer and sell a credit report product, but you have to take a bit more of an in-depth look. You have to look at like, okay, well, what are their debt payments? Or, how much have they borrowed? Have they been paying those bills on time? Do they have a history of kind of constantly, going to collections or kind of like going through a bankruptcy? You can't just look at a number and kind of make a decision. It's more about a holistic kind of view of that person. And we found that, funny enough, we found that credit scores are actually not the best predictor of tenant default because somebody with a prime credit scores over 720, they're going to have their pick of the market, right? They're going to have an easy time finding a new place to rent. So whereas somebody with a lower credit score, closer to 600 or below, they're going to have a hard time. So when they do get that lease, they're actually much more appreciative and more likely to kind of go the extra mile to be nice to their landlord and kind of do what they can because they know they're going to have a hard time finding another place if they, if they move on. So it's an interesting concept. What makes the biggest difference, in my opinion, is just affordability, making sure that you're not biting more than you can chew. That's why that rent income ratio really matters. And on top of that, you probably want to layer on, hey, what if they're paying $2,000 in rent payments, do they have an extra $1,000 of debt payments that they have on their, on their credit? Because at the end of the day, if you have money left over to set aside in case of a rainy day, if you have access to credit, those are things that will help you get through a kind of like income shock. Let's say you lose your job or you have unexpected expenses. Having a bit of room in your income versus your expenses is really going to make you a great tenant and be able to get through those rough times.
And just for the listener's benefit, like I've been through the SingleKey process and the application from the tenant side, and it's quite dynamic. You can, like you mentioned, you can add like your pay stub, you can add bank statements, your ID, driver's license. You can add your whoever else is going to be living with you, right? So if, for example, if you have 2, 3 incomes in the family, that will only help their application. Actually, quick question about that. That leads me to think. Say there's 3 people on the application. What does the charge change for the tenant application?
Well, we do charge on a per applicant basis because everybody will have their own credit history, their own background
Right.
kind of information as well. So while we can kind of like, and typically we'll ask for the household income, like you said, just to kind of assess the ability to pay for the entire household. we will run individual credit checks and background checks for each of those applicants separately.
Mhm.
But and yeah, no, so it is kind of on a per applicant basis. Yeah.
And it's only $25 retail.
Right.
The
Yeah.
Equifax was, I think, like at least 36, if I remember correctly, and that was 10 years ago. Well, sorry, that was nearly 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So it got
And,
cheaper.
sure, yeah, absolutely. I think more people use this, and now that the volume, I think, helps with that. And keeping the price low is important for us as well, just to make sure that there's no
Right.
excuse not to use it, and everybody kind of can go through that process. And it's a product that's constantly evolving. As I mentioned, at the end of March now, we're actually releasing a new version of it. It'll look a bit different. You have the option to go between the new and the old, but we're adding in new features. So, for example, we're looking towards adding in international credit checks, so you can actually
Oh,
screen.
wow.
Yeah, so
I've
we're
never seen that before.
that's a brand new kind of feature now, and we're working with a partner out of the US who has access to multiple credit bureaus across the world, and they're able to cover about 60% of the world's population. That will be a bit more expensive, but it will give lenders and property
Worth
managers
it.
totally
I
worth it.
despise risk.
Especially if you have no other kind of way of checking references for somebody that's international. This is
Yeah.
at least you kind of a good kind of a view of their financial standing. And the cool thing about this now is that all the international reports, it doesn't matter if they're from India or Europe or China, they'll get standardized. So they'll look just like the typical Equifax report. So you'll be able to kind of read and understand it. They'll even have a score that's out of 800, similar to your Equifax standard credit score. So I'm very excited about that. Other really cool features that we're adding in kind of like an ID verification, again, to deal with some of these fraud issues or kind of remote screening. So folks that, if you don't have a chance to meet them in person, but you just want to send that application link, well, we're adding in a selfie and ID check where they'll go through kind of an AI comparison of their, a liveness check where they have to basically take a three-dimensional selfie, and it'll match their face with their ID and run their driver's license to make sure that they are who they say they are. So that'll be like an add-on that you can add to your report. We're looking into bank scans, so the ability for, hey, if they have no credit or low credit, if you want to go one step further and dig in deeper, you can allow the tenant to log in with their bank account, and we will look at 24 months of transaction history and assess money in, money out. So what's their income, what does their spending look like, do they have any savings, even things like, did they pay their last landlord on time, because we can see the rent payments on their transaction history. So these are some of the really cool things that we're kind of adding on to the technology stack. And these are the landlord benefits. Lots more coming on the tenant side now. We're actually working towards building a tenant portal where we realize that, hey, we've got thousands of tenants coming to SingleKey, being invited by landlords to run the rental application. What can we do to add value to them as they're going through their kind of their own journey and moving into a new home? Well, one thing that we realized, Irvin, is that landlords don't like to see paper applications anymore because they don't trust them, because they're like, yeah, if you send me a PDF or a screenshot, you can easily just modify that on Photoshop.
Photoshop, yes. Yeah.
Right? So
everything can be Photoshopped. I trust nothing.
So I'm not going to accept that. I'm just going to run my own credit check again. But the problem with that is that you apply to 5 different listings now, you're going to get hit with 5 different credit checks, which is not great for your credit score. So what we're doing is we're building what's called a universal rental application. So the tenant can basically get access to their SingleKey report. For some, the landlord runs it for them. They can log in and then just share a link from SingleKey directly with as many landlords as they want. And it's non-modifiable. They can just basically get it directly from us, so they don't have a chance to change it. And even if you do print it out and hand it over to your landlord, it'll actually have a QR code there. It says "Scan to verify me." So you can actually scan that report. It'll take you to the SingleKey site and it'll verify all the information. So these are some of the things that we're doing to kind of really kind of combat fraudulent credit reports, fraudulent income information, because we can tap into your bank account and pull it directly, as opposed to just allowing you to upload an employment letter. So, this is a great kind of use case of like, hey, here's the technology saves you from going through the manual steps by just automating a lot of these things through different data providers.
That's super cool. Well, even the other new features that you mentioned, like international credit checking, like that's a huge win for international anyone. Because, for example, it's actually interesting. It was always hard to get the data on how many work visas and student visas were being given out each year.
Mhm.
So then now we know the number is over 400,000.
That's a
And likely these are all renters.
lot of renters, absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
So
Like
that's a lot of volume to process, right? And
400,000 a year. Yeah, that's a lot. And so how would we have ever processed their credit? And
yeah,
then and then what I saw in practice was people were usually asking for 6 or 12 months rent and upfront.
yeah. And I was just going to bring that up is that that's a big challenge now, especially like in the super competitive rental market that we're in. If you have no credit history, if you have no local income, you're forced to basically pay upfront in cash, 6 to 12 months of rent. Nobody has $30,000 in their bank account, to rent out a lease. So it puts renters in a very difficult position. So what we're actually kind of we're actually running a test with our underwriting partner where SingleKey will be offered as a guarantor service, meaning that, hey, if you're a tenant who has no credit history and you need like a local guarantor, we'll be your local guarantor. So,
Holy cow, really?
right?
You're really willing to put your money where your mouth is.
Well, it's very similar kind of spin-off on the existing rent guarantee program for landlords. We're just taking that offering to tenants and saying, hey, look, we'll guarantee your rent to your landlord and damages and legal fees so that you in their eyes you become a risk-free tenant and now you get first line access to that property and they'll feel more comfortable renting to you without asking for a 6 months or 12-month deposit,
Wow. You're
which is
coming to me as an insured tenant? That makes you a
exactly
much more better quality candidate.
right. So that's kind of the hope, and the problem that we're trying to solve is basically how do we get people away from these large deposits and more of an insurance product. And this is a better solution for two reasons. First of all, the obvious solution is that it's much more user friendly for the tenant because they're not having to write $30,000 checks up front. They're just paying an extra $100 a month for the insurance premium on average. And then for the landlord, it's actually a better risk management tool because I've had experiences where I've gone in front of the LTB with like a 12-month deposit. Needless to say, they frown upon that, right? And then keep in mind that a 6-month deposit, all it does is it just offsets the problem by 6 months. Like the risk doesn't go away; it just gets pushed back 6 months because what happens
Yeah.
if they stop rent on month 7? Now you still have an 8-month eviction process ahead of you where you're going to lose 8 months of income. So it's not a good solution. It makes it harder for you to go to LTB and fight those cases. All it does is it offset the problem. The rent guarantee is a much better solution and it's much more tenant friendly as well. So that's kind of the mission we're on now is let's replace a deposit with a rent guarantee instead. Which will work better for both parties.
This is exciting stuff.
Mhm.
Oh, Viler, I apologize. I should have asked this sooner, just in case anyone's confused. SingleKey now owns Neighborly. So is Neighborly effectively it's just now known as SingleKey as one company now?
Yeah, yeah. We acquired Neighborly in late last year, so about 4 months ago. That was a big kind of milestone for us because as you know, Neighborly has had a great brand in the market. They've been around for about 6 years, since 2016. And
And they're probably the most popular, were they not?
they
In
were the most
Canada?
popular. Yeah, they were the most popular tool in Canada, especially since they started offering a free report for a while, which made them very popular with a lot of landlords out there. And they had built a great platform, very kind of easy to use, very kind of a lot of focus on design and simplicity, and kind of getting as much information as possible from tenants to put together a great profile. I think for us that was a big milestone because we got to basically acquire one of our main competitors and also increase our reach by 2 or 3-fold and bring in their database of users onto SingleKey as well. And then on top of that, also getting their IP and their technology and being able to layer that on top of what we're offering with SingleKey. So some of these product releases that are coming to market now and end of Q1 is basically a combination of Neighborly Stack and SingleKey's kind of coming together in putting forth the best of both worlds. So we're excited to see how well received that new solution will be. Yeah.
Viler, you mentioned something to me was a bit shocking before we were recording. You were saying that SingleKey is significantly more popular in Alberta than Ontario,
Yeah.
even though we are are we like what 4 times their size and population?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say we sell more in Alberta than in Ontario, but on a per population or in
Per
terms of
capita basis?
capita basis,
Still, like, wow.
at least double, or if not more, in Alberta than in Ontario.
Because
And
our risk is much greater here than theirs.
surprised me, right? And it depends on the product. Some products, for example, the report does really well in Alberta. It's been really kind of embraced by the community there, and I think we've been lucky to kind of work with great partners. Mackenzie being one of them. He welcomed us into his Alberta Landlord community Facebook group and promoted us heavily, and did a ton of great reviews. So we've been able to get awareness there much faster, which is great. So I think for this year, that's the next challenge now, is how do we kind of really get awareness, get everybody in Ontario to know what we're working on and how we can add value to their business,
Right.
and try to reach the same level of penetration here in Ontario that we have in Alberta.
Right. Are you looking for penetration in Quebec and BC, where they also have difficult
No,
landlord laws?
we are Canada-wide, so we do well in BC as well. We are, we're available in the Maritimes as well. Quebec is a bit more of a kind of a work in progress, because they have kind of their own laws and regulations around, and also there's a few kind of language challenges that we're wrestling with as well. So that'll be an ongoing challenge.
Poor Quebec always gets like missed on everything.
And it is a market that does require these types of things, or these types of solutions, because there are a lot of landlords that they're having challenges, and we have a few kind of folks that use us and love us, and we want to do more there, if we have the opportunity.
Poor Quebec investors. For anyone interested in investing in Quebec, you can always talk to me. We can help you out in Ontario. So I want to ask. So, the startup story.
Yeah.
So again, we went to the same business school. I studied startups. I had the privilege of being lectured by one of our professors. Well, actually, he wasn't even really a professor, but the owner of Bombay Company, the
Oh,
furniture
wow.
company. It's no longer here, but it still is fascinating to hear his story. I think he was close to 80 years old. Like, he was so
Wow.
rich and so nice that he flew himself in from, like, his house is built on a mountain, I think, in California overlooking the ocean. So I'm pretty sure that the school cannot afford to pay him for his travel. But yeah, to give back, that's what he did. He flew from California to London, Ontario, the major metropolitan London, Ontario, to teach us about entrepreneurship. So I personally have always enjoyed learning about businesses, studying businesses. I'm interested in learning about your own journey. About, I'm like, I imagine you paid a lot for school.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm guessing you were paid a lot of money at your job when you were working at the banks, right? And you decided, screw it, I'm gonna start my own business.
yeah, yeah. And you know what? I think there's a lot of pros and cons to doing this, Herman. And you're an entrepreneur yourself, so you know kind of that very well. I think on the pro side is that you get to do what you love, and you get to kind of, like, work doesn't feel as kind of taxing as it does, if you're not doing what you love. You get a lot more kind of creative energy, because you get to kind of basically control your destiny and kind of do what you kind of think. You get to respond to the market, you get to listen to customers and kind of do something that they appreciate, and kind of get that feedback, which is great. So when you're building that's definitely the benefit. The pros are, sorry, the cons are that, hey, now it's just, it is a very risky proposition, right? You lose a lot of, as you mentioned, you give up kind of stable income and kind of security for something that is a bit of a gamble in that sense. I think also, by nature, you have to be somebody that enjoys this type of life, where you're not risk adverse. It doesn't keep you up at night.
Mhm.
um,
You don't have
you
kids, so you can take a bit more risks.
that helps, for sure, right? But that being said, I see some of the most successful entrepreneurs I know are in their 40s, and they do really well, because they can leverage that life experience, and bring in a lot of transferable skills in the business. Um, I think also, like, there's something that it should be noted, that it's not for everyone. I think you
Oh
have to.
no, it's not.
There, yeah, there's certain, I think, traits and then kind of characteristics that separate entrepreneurs from other people, and you have to have the hustle and the grit and the hard work. There's no substitute for those things.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter how smart you are, how well
Hmm.
educated. If you can't do the work and kind of really kind of solve problems fast,
Hmm.
you're not going to make it, right? So
Hmm.
you have to be a bit self-aware as well. And I think for me, what gave me confidence is that this is my first business. I had another one during school. I was out there kind of running my own landscaping business, and then afterwards, I hired all my buddies, and we kind of had our summer jobs, and kind of going door to door and selling, and growing the business. So, I did, at least I had kind of the fundamentals and the basics down on how to, run a business, kind of sell to customers, talk to customers, build a team, manage them, and all that. So, which was helpful for me. But I think you don't really know until you try. And the best thing to do, especially at a young age, if you're in your 20s, or like you said, you don't have a lot of responsibilities, take the shot. You won't know if you're good at it until you try.
It's fantastic. And obviously, I'm guessing you're pretty bright. You have your bachelor's of engineering from U of T, which I'm pretty sure is not that easy to get into. You graduate from you have your master's in business from the best business school in the world. Obviously, I have a biased opinion. You're no dummy. With that fair assessment?
Investing in yourself and in your education is probably one of the best things you can do. It's by no means a requirement. I've seen a lot of fantastic entrepreneurs with no education at all, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's helped me. I mean, hey, my first kind of like investors and kind of partners in this business were all guys that I met at Ivy Business School, right?
Oh, the networking paid off. I love it.
Yeah, it opens doors. It also puts you in touch with people that kind of have or kind of have the experience or the knowledge and the skills that you need. So it's a good kind of supporting network in that sense that people reach out to and get help and get advice and all that.
Right.
Yeah.
So for the listeners' benefit, if you're not familiar with how at least how the MBA at Western works, which, again, number one business school in the world, as a requirement of entering the MBA is real world experience. So I imagine, and so what, from my own experience, when the MBAs that I met, it ranged, and on the top end, you would have occasionally someone who serves on like 6 boards of like publicly traded companies. So again, the experience is vast in range, but that would be the top end. Like literally, it's actually funny because that gentleman actually sat in the class. That class was managing board of governors. So they literally had someone who sat on like 3 or 6 boards as a student in that class. So wonderful experiences to share and value and networking to be obtained at potentially while doing an MBA.
Absolutely, you're really selling the MBA, Arvin.
No, so my own journey was right or wrong. I looked at having. I did consider doing an MBA. At the time, I think the price tag was at least 30,000 before housing, travel costs, books, all those sorts of things. I literally chose to buy a house instead. I chose to buy an income property instead. So, not to say, my point though is that networking where there are high value people is never a bad thing.
Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely. And it's a great place to find high value networking opportunities would be at a business school.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, if I may add, I think at the end of the day, the best way to kind of, if your life goal is to kind of build wealth and make money, entrepreneurship may not be the best way to do that because there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of things that could go wrong. You may be better off just kind of, working towards a high powered career as a lawyer, doctor, or what have you, because yes, it takes probably the same amount of work, but the risk is much lower because you know that if you have the skill set and the experience, you will have pretty much a higher market value. But I think that the X factor is, are you doing what you love, right? Is that kind of what gets you out of bed in the morning and gives you energy and kind of inspires you to kind of work hard and then push through the roadblocks? And if not, and if this is what kind of what drives you, then that's what you should do.
And just because I love options, one other option would be, for example, is I'm gonna guess that your executives are quite well paid, and they take considerably less risk than you take.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So and they still get a taste of the entrepreneurial world. So nothing wrong with that.
I mean, we do, and look, at the end of the day, we're still a young business and fast-growing business. So everybody has a stake in our success, and we kind of all benefit or kind of we all kind of go down together in that sense, right? So it's a lot of these guys took pay cuts to work at SingleKey as opposed to the consulting or kind of banking or engineering careers. But they also have some upside. So if we do kind of really well, they'll do well as well. I think that's the main thing to kind of think about.
No, I love it all. I don't think there's ever a wrong answer. I think
But I want
everything's great.
to that point, Aaron, as well. By the way, if you want to try out your hand at kind of like working in a small business or a startup, the best thing to do is go work for somebody else, right? Go work for somebody where you can learn on their time and
Yeah,
kind
let
of
them take the risk while they pay you.
right? So it's the best education you can get.
So I think we need to spend more time on SingleKey because again, I think we just went through it so quickly. For example, I have a lot of student rentals.
Yes.
That is SingleKey accommodates for single student tenants.
Not currently, but we are with a new program with a new tenant passport that we're offering, Arvin. So the one that kind of allows for new to Canada and students, etc. So we can kind of talk a bit about that for sure.
Mhm. What about just like, my typical tenant's usually like, 20 years old. So again,
Yeah.
my experience is majority of my tenants are Canadians. Like they have driver's licenses, they're Canadian. Actually, no, a lot of young people don't have driver's licenses these days. But for
Yeah.
example, if I wanted to, and then in practice, a lot of landlords, student rental landlords do not. And then just to give context, like my properties have usually around 6 students in them, right?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about
And
student rental means a lot.
so are they rooming? Are they? I guess they are, right? Like,
Yeah. Oh
like a
yeah, I
what?
think
Like,
I don't know how you lived when you went to Western.
no, same thing, right? Room in a house. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
There you go. That's the scenario, like a rooming house. Is that the user that can do
Yeah.
rooming
It's
house users can apply using SingleKey as well?
they can definitely apply using SingleKey, so we can run the credit and background check and all that stuff, and then process a rental application and show, the rent guarantee doesn't currently support them yet, but it's something we're working towards.
All right.
With the new version, yeah.
What if they were willing to put a guarantor on it?
Then yes, if they're willing to put a guarantor that has income, like a
Yeah.
parent, then we can definitely guarantee them. Yeah.
This is amazing because, like for example, a client of mine, he listed, not listed, whatever. He for rent he had a 5-bedroom house close to McMaster University, 2 kitchens, so 5-bedroom in-law suite, so 2 bathroom, 2 kitchens. Not a legal duplex, it's in-law suite, whatever. A single family home. He had 25 requests to see it.
Wow.
So if you're one of those parties, and I show up with a SingleKey application, like this is we are guaranteed.
Yeah,
you would really stand out.
absolutely. That's the goal here, right? So and yeah, that's exactly it. Is, hey, this is a differentiator. It puts you ahead of the pack, especially now where it's so difficult to basically compete and kind of there's so much demand and so little supply. You need any advantage you can get. So this is a great way for you to kind of really stand out and have a guarantor stand behind you.
This is amazing because I see this regularly in the news, like people who are competing for rentals.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And they're all looking to stand out. So, for example, like it's pretty common practice in downtown Toronto where people show up, driver's license, bank statement,
Right.
and then they still lose. They have a 6-figure job and they still lose because again, like if you have like 6 applicants, you don't really, as a landlord, you don't have the means to screen them all completely. Versus again, you show up with a guarantee. Like there's no guarantees in life, but
sets you apart from other people, right? And it's having a kind of a professional kind of rental company also kind of guarantee you. I think that goes a bit further than just having a regular guarantor, like a parent or so, because we have a reputation to uphold, and we'll make sure that we've screened you properly. And also, hey, if SingleKey is willing to stand behind these people, it means that they're comfortable with taking on the risk, or we're comfortable with the risk. So I think that's a vote in their favor to say that, well, at least this tenant has been screened, they've been vetted. They are compliant. Like, if SingleKey feels comfortable guaranteeing them, then as a landlord, I feel comfortable renting to them in that sense. Yeah.
So for example, if I was trying to rent in a competitive rental environment, I could stand out by purchasing your insurance as well on me.
Absolutely, yeah. It's you basically approach us on the new website that's coming out in March now. There will be a landing page where you can actually sign up for that and go through the sign up process and vet yourself, and then we will kind of basically provide you a guarantee certificate that you bring with you when you apply to a rental property. So you can go over to your lender and say, hey, look, I am a guaranteed kind of tenant by SingleKey. And then now here's the benefits of that is that, hey, if I default on rent payments for whatever reason, if I lose my job or I can't pay, you're covered for the next 12 months of lost rental income. You're covered for damages up to $10,000. You're covered for legal fees in case something goes wrong. So you can rent to me with peace of mind, knowing that, you know, if I can't perform on this contract, SingleKey will backstop me.
This
So
is amazing.
that's really the value proposition.
I remember back it was a long time ago, I had this tenant who was an executive from the States who was relocating to Burlington, Ontario,
There you go. Yeah.
for work because he was the head of all of Canada, right? And he made like he made a lot of money. I think he made close to $400,000 salary, but he had no credit.
Absolutely.
So the screening was difficult. This is back in like, 2007 or something like that. So before SingleKey existed. I think you were still in university at the time. So the company could have just been the guarantor and insured him, and we could have sped up the whole application process.
So in fact, we'd be able to do two things. So for Americans, we can actually, right now, we can actually screen them. So the SingleKey report does work on American applicants as well. And secondly, we actually actively work with relocation agencies for exactly what you mentioned. We have executives from Amazon coming over here making, well into the six figures, and they can't get a lease because, they have no Canadian credit, and landlords are quick to kind of move on to the next applicant.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a great way for typically relocation agencies or realtors that work with these folks who will partner up with us to basically make sure that we guarantee them and screen them so that the landlord feels comfortable renting to them.
That's super cool. That's super cool. And then what kind of security do you have in terms of like protecting people's data? For example, for anyone not familiar for SingleKey, for example, it is the tenant who are filling out the application themselves on their own account. Is that correct?
Yeah. So right now, typically the way that works is that we have to be compliant with these because and we take security and privacy very, very carefully or very seriously. You probably want to talk to Mike and our team. We spent the last 3 months kind of dealing with lawyers and the Privacy Commission and everybody else to make sure that we're compliant. But we are dealing with a lot of sensitive information. We're dealing with kind of personal information like your name, date of birth, potentially SIN number if you feel if you share it, and then we're also dealing with your credit data, which if it falls in the wrong hands, can be used to basically apply for a credit card or kind of fraudulent purposes. So for that reason, we're very careful in how we basically gather that information, how we share it, how we get consent from tenants to make sure that we do it properly. So the rule of thumb is typically we encourage people or landlords to just invite the tenants to fill out our online rental application. That way they're voluntarily sharing their information. And going through that process, they're also providing explicit consent to actually, run the report. So that's a big kind of a step towards that. We make sure that currently the landlord only gets access to the report once the tenants fill out their information, and it's available through them through the SingleKey portal. That way we can kind of manage access, we can control the access information. We encourage people to share kind of those reports through links as opposed to just printing out PDFs and saving them on paper or handing them over. It's going paperless. It's a safer way to operate in general. But you also brought up, hey, do we have an offline version, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and the answer is yes. So we actually,
just to give the use case for the listeners' benefit. So, for example, if I get a tradesperson who's in their 50s, you can tell when you shake their hand that they're good at their job, but that's what they do for a living. Typically they make a really good income. They're pretty much all six figures. They're hardworking people, blue collar people, right? That's likely someone I want to rent to. But in practice, some of them are not strong with a smartphone or a laptop. But I still want them to apply, right? I still would like to potentially have them as my tenant. So in the past, literally, I've given people. In that case, we asked them to do neighborly. They didn't have the tech savvy to do it, so we handed them a hard copy, and so that's available as well.
Yeah. So if you go to the SingleKey.com, go to the tenant report and click order now, you'll see two options, Erwin. So one says invite the tenant, which is very similar to the neighborly application form. The second option says enter tenant information. So with that option, now you can actually just enter the tenant's name, date of birth, address, and potentially and SIN number is optional, and you can get the report basically run right away without having to invite the tenant to the online application. That requires that you've gotten consent from them offline. So whether they've kind of submitted, let's say, a paper rental application to you, giving you their information and their kind of a consent, then that's no problem. You can take a photo of that and just upload it along with your request, and we can basically just run the report and send it back to you. It's also very helpful for folks, like you mentioned, folks that are having trouble with the technology, or maybe a bit more of an older applicant would be more comfortable kind of going down that path. But also I find that some folks have their own technology, so they'll have their own tech for like property management tools, or kind of like they have their own rental application that they like. So no problem, you can keep using that. But when the tenant fills out your rental application, you can just take their info, enter it into SingleKey, and get the results right away without having to send another invite to the tenant and having them fill out the same information they've already provided. So it's all about flexibility, giving more options to make it easier for you to basically run that report, however you like.
Is there anything you guys don't do? You don't manage property.
We don't find tenants. That's where we kind of work with partners like you guys to help with that.
Viler, again, sorry, for the listeners' benefit, I understand like where we've come from. Like I remember when things changed, when something changed in privacy, where I can no longer run someone's credit report, even though they filled out the paper application. I remember having a discussion with one of these vendors that provide tenant checking services. They basically told us about all the hoops you have to jump through. We have to have like a filing cabinet that's locked, and it has to be inspected one time or something like that to prove that it's private. So then we actually moved towards, they would have to verbally tell us what was on the report and give us, which wasn't bad actually. I actually didn't mind it at all because they were giving me a non-professional opinion.
That's the same process we went to get our API access to our credit bureaus. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Just so again, for folks, like there's a lot of hoops to jump through that you no longer have to jump through now that these what's the term, prop tech, real estate technology firms are doing for us.
Absolutely.
There's really no excuse now to check your tenant.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I think that there's been, as you know, there's been a few data breaches, especially with some of the major credit bureaus in the past. So when that happened, they really tightened up their policies, which is understandable. And I think it's good for the market overall to just have a better kind of, and better for the consumer ultimately, and the tenants to take extra steps to protect their data and their private information, so it doesn't get gets in the market. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't actually, the credit reporting.
Yeah.
Sorry. So SingleKey also reports rent to their Equifax?
Yeah. So now the way we do that, Erwin, is that we had a challenge with that because we've seen some options available where you can just, hey, my tenant didn't pay the rent, I can just go and report it. We didn't want to do that because I think that it's kind of self-serve. There's no real, it's hard to gather evidence. It's very manual as a process. So why don't we just kind of why don't we pair this up with a rent collection tool and offer Canada's first easy automated PAD rent collection tool to small homeowners. And as you know, most property managers are out there that are doing volume, 100 plus units. They're all on PADs because it makes life so much easier. Where you set it up, you set it and forget it, and it just pulls the rent automatically each month. So we said, okay, so let's take that PAD tool and then plug it into Equifax's Metro 2 formatting for rent reporting. Now it's the same as basically reporting payments on a credit card. That payment either went through or it didn't, and it's black and white. There's no evidence required. There's no confusion around that, and there's no debating it. So it's a much more transparent, accountable, easy kind of solution to put in place. Currently, we're offering the rent collection tool free for everyone to use for as long as you need to for the first 3 applicants or first 3 tenants that they set up, and then we charge a small fee, I think $3 to $5 per month.
That's it.
Yeah, that might change soon because I think some of we're getting a lot of demand for it, so we're incurring a bit more cost there. But B, also the rules around kind of Canadian payment systems are changing a bit more. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. So the cost is going up a bit, but also payments are going a lot faster. We're moving towards real-time payments, which is a big innovation now that Payments Canada has been pushing towards for the past 5 years. Create something that's more akin to like the ACH system in the US as opposed to the slow 3-4 day processing EFT system we have in Canada. So we'll be very excited when that's up and running, because that means you can get your rent on the 1st of the month as opposed to the 3rd or the 4th.
Okay, I have a weird question. So listeners benefit. No one gets their questions in advance. What if I want to be paid can I charge rent in different currencies?
Not yet. No.
So SingleKey is mainly for Canadians then?
Okay, mainly for Canadians, but we are enabling credit card payments for rent, and I'll tell you why that's important. Because for internationals, that hey, I'm sending my son to study in Canada, it's much easier for the parent to just basically put the rent on the credit card and just say, hey, I just want to put it on a credit card. So if you guys take Amex, Visa, Union Pay, whatever, MasterCard, I'll just throw it on my credit card and I'll pay the rent for them. And I don't have to worry about FX. I don't have to worry about, having to have a Canadian bank account, whatever. I can just put in a credit card and I'm done. And that's great, because then we can just basically build that card on a monthly basis as a subscription service. So whatever the rent is, $2,000 a month, it just gets billed on a card, and anybody can pay from anywhere, which is great.
But you'll take a credit card from a Canadian too, then, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, when the tenant gets the invite now with a new rent collection tool, so this will be available, I'd say, in about a quarter, so in about 3 months time frame. When they get the invite to pay.
Sorry. This was released in 3 weeks, so we're talking about May 2023-ish. May, June.
Yeah. And it's hard to say now, because there's a lot of competing priorities. There's a lot of stuff, as you can see, kind of coming online. But yeah, I would say probably around summertime, you're looking at kind of having the option to pay rent with a credit card. So the way our rent collection tool works is that you set the terms. You say, hey, rent's $2,000 a month starting on March 1st, recurring on the 1st of the month. All right. And then and then you set up your bank account. Then an invite gets sent to the tenant saying, hey, Erwin invited you to pay your rent online.
Mm-hmm.
Click here to set up your payment method. And you can pay either through a Canadian bank account. So we can only take Canadian bank accounts for now, through EFT payments, which are low cost, they're almost free. Or you can pay by putting a credit card in. Right now, the credit card, it can be anybody that puts, or from anywhere you can pay that rent, and there's some benefits there, because you can get points, and you can get bill credit by paying down the credit card, rewards, etc. It also gives flexibility for parents to pay on behalf of the student.
Yeah. So yeah, especially my students. Yeah, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll definitely let you know as soon as it's ready.
That's for example, like one of the things I'm really jealous about Airbnb is, as an Airbnb host, you have their credit card. That's incredibly powerful. Question: what about damages? For example, say they got drunk and fell on top of the coffee table and broke it. Yeah, now I have a $60 damage. Can I put that through?
So it's TBD, because I think with
feature request.
We're looking at around the compliance aspect of that functionality. So if you're on the rent guarantee, potentially yes, but there's still a few things to kind of work out there. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then the longer term feature request is in case I ever want to collect rent in Bitcoin.
Sure. Yeah.
Not right away. It's okay. I don't think the world's falling apart yet. No, I'm kidding. Viler, thanks you so much. Like, this is holy wow. As we were discussing before recording, like, awareness is really the big problem for both yourself and for the public.
Well, no, absolutely. And I think, Erwin, to kind of just kind of summarize it all up, right? In terms of kind of what are we doing? Why are we focused on this problem? If you look at kind of where the world is going, over the past, 5 to 10 years, we've had there's been a lot of changes to the real estate market and just the economy overall, right? We're seeing more kind of long-term renters out there, folks that kind of can't afford to buy or access to real estate until later in life, so they rent for a lot longer. We're seeing a lot of urban centers now become very expensive, right? And that we're in a bit of an affordability crisis now. That's been an issue for over 5 years. And as we saw during COVID, the government is now looking to take steps to protect the renters, because there's more of them. They're staying renters for longer, and they're the small guy that they are responsible for looking after. And we saw them doing that during COVID, where they said, "Hey, if you lose your job, don't pay."
Our conservative provincial government.
Fair enough, and not just in Canada, but the same thing happened in every state in the U.S. They had eviction moratoriums. In some places, a lot worse than there were in Ontario and other.
I think California still has theirs.
Yeah, California, New York, it was definitely a lot more. So, in my opinion, that's a trend that's not going to stop now. I think as we look into the future, housing is going to continue to get more expensive. Why? Because there's constant demand, there's limited supply. So as affordability and vacancy crisis continues to loom, the risks for the governments have to take legal action to protect tenants, but in doing so, they're making it more difficult and risky for landlords to do business, meaning, hey, harder to get tenants out, more restrictions around kind of like what you can do and kind of flexibility there. So some of the tools that we're offering now, like the rent guarantee and these tenant screenings tools, are going to become more and more necessary as time goes on, because the risk keeps going high, keeps increasing in the rental market. And our responsibility is, how do we kind of basically counteract that? How do we basically offer the tools, the scale, the risk management back office that landlords can count on to secure their rental income, to protect their property and their investment, even as the kind of regulatory environment begins to tighten up around them. So that's kind of where I see kind of our position in the market.
Right. And it's automated and it's inexpensive.
And ideally, fully automated, saves you time in the process as well. And yeah, absolutely.
So thanks so much for coming on. I am, like you said, we needed more awareness. I am so much more aware at all these things I had no idea. Obviously, all these future releases that no one knows about. Like I'm excited.
Oh, thanks for having me, and I'm glad you're excited, because I'm hoping everybody else will be as well. And we're definitely super excited to bring this stuff to market and see how our customers react.
Viler, any final words about anything? We're at the end of February. Some people think the real estate market's going to collapse. I'm sure you're hoping that's not true.
Yeah, I know.
And even if it does, there'll be more tenants.
It's funny because, a lot of people ask the same thing. Are you worried about your business collapsing because the market is kind of turning, right? Interest rates are going up, prices are coming, there's a bit of a price shock. And my response is that, you couldn't be in a safer business, because the housing is the most kind of necessary, spending category that anybody has, right? Everybody needs housing, everybody needs to live somewhere. So if you're a housing provider, or if you're a grocery store, you're not going to go out of business anytime soon, regardless of what happens to the economy. So I think that should give you, at least some peace of mind that you're kind of probably in one of the safer sectors in the economy during this time. And you also have a big responsibility, right? Because I think investors and landlords play a big role in bringing affordable housing, quality housing to the market. And we want to basically encourage them we want to encourage more landlords to enter the market, go out there and kind of renovate properties, bring them in better state, and kind of offer them to the tenants. So that, because that's the limitation factor now, is that we have a limited supply, and we need more funding and more investment in that area to bring more housing stock to the market, because that'll be for everyone, I think. Yeah.
I have no experience in this, but I'm just gonna make a suggestion. I hope you let the media know and the government know when the international credit checks are available, because there's a bit of a disconnect in our government, in our universities, post-secondary schools in general, that they're regularly recruiting international students to come here, but we have a foreign buyer ban, so you may not buy a house. So we landlords are the ones who are left to provide housing, but we have no means to properly screen them.
No, and if there's any channels or any reporters you work with, Erwin, let us know, because we're looking to kind of find ways to kind of spread the word. But yeah, we're very excited about that product, and I think we'll be the exclusive provider for the international credit checks in Canada, at least for the next year or two. So we really want to kind of ramp that product up. And as you said, 400,000 people, that's a lot of folks in need.
Yeah, that's like half of the new residents each year. That's a lot of people.
Absolutely. And it's a big problem that needs solving, for sure.
Fantastic. Viler, thanks so much again for doing this.
Thanks for having me. This is great. I appreciate the invite.
Thank you for watching. If you want to learn how to invest in real estate from scratch, my team teaches beginners how to use the #1 investment strategy that I personally use in a virtual free training class every month. Go to investortraining.ca/YouTube to register for our next class. The link is also in the description as well. I publish at least 2 to 3 videos a week here, so subscribe if you want to keep learning from seasoned investors like myself and my guests. And if you're just starting out, feel free to ask questions and comment below, and I do the best to answer each of those comments and questions myself. Again, if you're ready to learn the nitty-gritty about real estate investing from a professional investor, register for our next virtual class. That's at investortraining.ca/YouTube. Thanks again for watching. See you in the next video.